We acknowledge that we are gathering here on the traditional territory of the Squetnik people with whom we share these lands and where we live and we work together. The adoption of the agenda, I'll check with staff to see if there's any additions to the agenda from staff.
Your Worship, there were some late items for this evening for item 23.2 and 24.2.
Okay, that's a letter from the Treats.
Correct.
Thank you. That's for the evening session. Appreciate that. Councillors, do you have any additions to the agenda? Okay, seeing none. Any disclosure of interest from any councillors? Councillor Flynn.
Your Worship, I have previously declared a conflict for item 14.1 because Silvatech, even though this is a different company, Silvatech Consulting is a employee benefit client, and I have also declared a conflict on 22.1, 23.1, and 24.1. So considering that's more than half of the evening agenda, as long as we have quorum, I just won't come back for the evening session.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Flynn. Any other councillors have disclosure? Yes, Councillor Wallace-Richmond, go ahead.
Thanks, Your Worship. Under correspondence, there's a letter from the CSRD regarding Shuswap Watershed Council. I'll step away at that time.
Okay, thank you. Should that come up? Appreciate it. Any other disclosure of interest from any councillor? Okay, seeing none, we'll move into our agenda, starting with the confirmation of minutes, the regular council meeting of September the 14th. We have a motion.
Moved by Councillor Flynn, seconded by Councillor Wallace-Richmond, that the regular council meeting minutes of September 14th, 2020 be adopted as circulated.
Any additions, deletions, business arising? Seeing none, is there any opposed to that motion? That passes unanimously. Thank you. We'll go to committee reports. With committee reports, I will ask for a vote. Starting with 7.1, Downtown Parking Commission meeting minutes of September the 15th, 2020. We have a motion.
Moved by Councillor Lyson, seconded by Councillor Cannon, that the Downtown Parking Commission meeting minutes of September 15th, 2020 be received as information.
Any additions, deletions, business arising? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor, please indicate on chat line, those online. Thank you. That passes unanimously. 7.2, Active Transportation Task Force meeting minutes of September the 21st. Do we have a motion?
Moved by Councillor Lavery, seconded by Mayor Harrison, that the Active Transportation Task Force meeting minutes of September 21, 2020 be received as information.
Thank you. Any additions, deletions, or business arising? Councillor Lavery, do you wish to comment at all?
Thank you, Your Worship. I'll just note that it's the first meeting, the inaugural meeting, the session. We will be focusing in the next little while on the wet eatings currently in place in Salmon. The plans to do a provincial update have been put on hold given the overall election context at this stage. But the overall goal is still to get back to council with some broad recommendations on best practices and policies that resonated for the context of Salmon before Christmas.
Thank you, Councillor Lavery. Councillor Lindgren?
Thank you. Are we talking about the Parking Commission report?
No, we're on to Active Transportation Task Force.
Okay, so I missed this one. Okay. Bummer.
Any other comments on the active transportation? Okay, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? That passes unanimously. Thank you. Item 7.3, Housing Task Force meeting minutes of September the 23rd. We have a motion.
Moved by Councillor Wallace-Richmond, seconded by Councillor Lavery, that the Housing Task Force meeting minutes of September 23rd, 2020 be received as information.
Any additions, deletions, or business arising?
Your Worship, a comment from me?
Yes, please, Councillor Wallace-Richmond.
Thanks. It was a pleasure to co-host with staff and of the Housing Task Force. We had not met in some time. We were able to review a draft plan of the community housing strategy, which will be coming to council for consideration, hopefully in the month of October.
Thank you, Councillor Wallace Richmond. Any other comments or questions? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? That passes unanimously. Thank you. We'll go to 8.1, which is Columbia Shuswap Regional District Update, the board in brief. Not sure if Councillor Flynn or Eliason wish to speak to this. Councillors have any questions? Seeing none, we'll receive that as information. And we'll move on to staff reports, starting item 9.1, Director of Corporate Services, the 2021 Property Insurance Renewal. There's a motion on the front page, if I can have a mover and a seconder. Councillor Flynn, Councillor Cannon, thank you. I'll pass it over to the corporate officer.
Thank you, Your Worship. In July 2018, the city undertook a request for proposal process to obtain property crime, equipment breakdown, marina operators legal liability, and environmental impairment liability insurance. It was subsequently awarded to MIABC, and there was an option to renew for 2 years after. This here before you are these are the terms for the second renewal year. And so next year we would be looking to go to RFP again. The city is very pleased with the terms submitted for your approval. And we saw a very, very slight increase this year, despite the fact that we actually have higher values for our assets. So the terms are very favorable, coming in around $50 higher this year than last year. One other item to note here is the recommendation to include CyberPro coverage this year. And there's aggregate policy limits ranging from $250,000 to $2 million, and the premiums are shown in the report. Instances of cybercrime have increased significantly in recent years, with more attacks being directed at local governments. The city has taken many steps to build a robust network security system. However, we are still seeing many cyber criminals breaching the walls of secure networks. So this coverage would assist the city with ransom, investigative costs related to data breach, notification of affected parties, the cost to recover data, the cost to repair and restore compromised software and systems, and fines and penalties that could arise from these actions. And it is recommended that the city purchase $2 million of coverage for cyber at a premium of $8,100.
Great, thank you very much. I'll open it up to any questions councillors might have. Councillor Lindgren.
Thanks. Couple questions. The first one is about the environmental impairment liability shown on page 36. It's less than half what we paid last year and the year prior. I'm just wondering, did we change the amount of coverage that we needed, or the value of what we're covering, or why did it drop so dramatically?
Corporate officer.
Through your worship, MIABC was able to find another carrier for us that actually had significantly lower premiums.
That's great news. Okay, the other question is about the type of coverage, provision of property / crime / equipment breakdown. Does this cover the parking meters? And the reason I'm asking is because I thought that we had discussion a couple of meetings back, maybe a couple months back, I'm not sure, about replacing the parking meters that had been vandalized and how they wouldn't be covered by the I thought they wouldn't be covered by the insurance policy because our deductible is too high or something. And then in the parking commission report today, it said that the replacement of the parking meters was covered by the insurance. And so I'm just wondering, I think I need a refresher maybe on what is and what isn't covered, and when are we going to be able to claim parking meter vandalism?
Thank you. Corporate officer.
through your worship, that's a great question. So we had two separate instances of vandalism of parking meters. We had the original parking meters where you just put the coin in and turn the crank, and we had a lot of those vandalized. But because they were under our deductible of $10,000 and occurred on multiple occasions, we couldn't make that work. If it had all happened at once and the value of damage was over 10,000, that would have been covered, no doubt about it. With respect to the meters that you're seeing, those were the larger ticket spitter machines, and those have been covered. We did put in a claim for those, and we were approved.
So then this coverage, this coverage that we're proposing today is a continuation of the existing coverage, and that again would cover if these expensive machines were damaged?
That's
Corporate Officer?
Awesome, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Lindgren. And I see Councillor Lyson and Lavery moved and seconded to include the cyber insurance. I believe that's covered in the original motion, yes. So councillors, that is included in the original motion. Thank you for your thoughts there. Any other comments before I call the question? Seeing none, all those in favor? That passes unanimously. Thank you very much. We'll go to item 9.2, Director of Engineering and Public Works, Salmon RRFB Crosswalk Study Recommendations. There's no motion attached, it's for our information, but I'll ask the Director of Engineering and Public Works to review the report with us.
Thank you, Your Worship. So the rectangular rapid flashing beacons, RRFBs, we have been installing some of them since 2005. We've got about 10 in our inventory right now. And at one of the traffic safety committees, when we're reviewing some of the locations, ICBC sits on our traffic safety committee, and they recommended that that we should have a warrant system or a better system to justify the locations and the commitment of these apertures. So they partnered with us on doing this study, and we had the study completed in 2020, and now we have a actual warrant system. They have reviewed all of the locations. You'll see with the attached map, you'll see the different recommended locations for these installations. So we've come up with sort of a long-term capital plan based on the asset management roles that our city engineer is working on. And it's basically to show council that, again, we had talked about this earlier about installing new bright and shiny pieces of equipment. Well, we have to maintain that, and we also have to manage the older equipment. So there is a lifespan of about 20 years on these units. There is also some minor maintenance because the batteries do need to be replaced after about 5 years. So not so much in maintenance, but so we will be coming forward with, in future budgets, with these installations. And you'll see in the report that up by Field of Dreams is the priority locations for this upcoming budget year. And essentially, this is a living document, so if things come up that are not on this map or not in the recommendations, we can actually use the study to help us determine whether it's safe to put it in or not. And just by adding these flashers doesn't make the intersection more safe. That's a key and critical point. We can't just be putting these up at every crosswalk because it provides some. If it's in the wrong location, it'll provide false sense of security, and we will end up with problems. So we're very happy that we're partnering with ICBC on this, and I think we have a very good product for moving forward.
Great, thank you. I see Councillor Lyson's question, and thanks for putting it on the chat line, Councillor Lyson. Do we have options for how much the actual units cost? For example, the overhead ones versus the small solar ones like at the canoe ball field to the beach?
Your Worship, yes, we do. So we have moved to the smaller units. They're basically they're mounted on a Telspar post, so and they have very high rapid flashing beacons and a small solar battery on the top of the post. And thus far, they seem to be very visible, and they are definitely a different price compared to the larger units that have come out. So we do have some options on the installation costs.
Thank you. Councillor Lyson, any follow-up to that? He says, how much are they? Do we have a cost for the solar ones?
They can range anywhere from $6,000 to $12,000, depending on the installation and location. I mean, if you're wiring them in, it's going to cost a lot more. So, but around $6,000 to $8,000 for the solar, and $12,000 if we have to wire them.
Great, thank you for that ballpark figure. Thanks, Councillor Eliason. Councillor Lindgren.
Thanks. I just had a couple questions, if you could help me understand the report. Thanks for doing the report, and I think it's a great idea that we have a warrant system. I don't believe it was included here, but I probably wouldn't understand it anyways. But I just wanted to clarify the numbers. It says that we have $158,000 worth of investment. If I broke that down at $12,000 each, that gives us about 13 of them, but there are actually only 10. And so I'm not sure how the money divides up. And then on page 41, there's a graph with some light blue bars and some red bars. I'm guessing that the light blue bars are existing light systems, and the red ones are new or replacement systems, but I'm not sure, and maybe you could clarify what those are. And if you divide those up into $12,000 pieces, then there's 12 of them in blue. So I'm just unclear how this, and on the map it shows 11 of them, but I'm not sure what the inset is actually showing us, so that may be a repeat of one that's already on the map somewhere else.
Director of Engineering and Public Works.
So a lot of questions there. I'll try and answer them. So I'll go to the chart first. The light blue is definitely the ones that we have installed. The red ones are forecasted for future installations. And you'll see that the higher ones are the ones where we will be installing two at a time. And then when we're down to the $10,000, that will be one. The installation is also covers the cost of the installation. So not only the unit, but also the labor and materials to install them. And again, just going back to to Councillor Eliason's question, we can't always use solar in this community, right? Because of the trees and the overgrowth. So sometimes we do have to actually put them in using wired solutions. So cost-wise, we do have 11 of the units. One of the units was actually a very old one, which is located at the Sentinoka Mall. That one's been there for quite a number of years, and it's a large one with the overhanging crosswalk symbol. So it's a little bit different than what we are proposing, and it's still included in this, but we wouldn't expect to replace any of those type of units. So I think I've answered your questions.
Thank you. Councillor Flynn.
Thank you, Your Worship. This, I'm gathering, was in the works while we were dealing with the recent request for a crosswalk. So it's interesting the timing that this came after we dealt with that. I had a question. I think this is awesome, and I think it depoliticizes the issue and makes it a little more scientific. And not that you're always right, and like you said, we could have all of these installed next week and we wouldn't necessarily be in a safer position. My question is, can we do a similar thing for regular crosswalks? Or in light of what happened the last month and a half, can we make it very clear what the process is to the public to get a crosswalk, i.e. traffic and safety, check warrants, all of those things? Because I would like to depoliticize it and not have it about who raised money or made it public versus some science. And again, you can't engineer safety, so it's not all about science, but at least having a system that we can point to, which we did in my mind and made the right decision, but can we expand this to regular sidewalks?
Director of Engineering and Public Works.
That's a very good question. Because we have this document now, and it was in the works for many months, like we knew it was coming, we just got the final document in early September. So going to your question is in regards to making the public aware of it, or when requests come in, we will still process them the same way we do now.
Okay.
We will take the requests. If staff feel that they can deal with them specifically, we will. We will inform the people that are inquiring of the warrant system or of the study. And if they're more complicated, we will take them to the Traffic Safety Committee for some additional comments or thoughts.
Okay.
So I think the process that we have right now is very good, and I don't think that we'll ever get away from the politicized issues.
Okay, well, thank you, and I really appreciate this and think this is a great report.
Thank you. Any other questions? All right, thank you very much. Thank you to the Director of Engineering and Public Works. We will move forward to item 9.3, Director of Engineering and Public Works, LED Street Lighting Upgrade Program. We have a proposed motion, moved by Councillor Flynn, seconded by Councillor Cannon. Thank you. Pass it over to the Director of Engineering and Public Works.
Thank you, Your Worship. There's a lot of information in this report. One thing I would like to highlight is our Capital Works Supervisor, Tim Parapokin, has been doing a lot of work on the lighting inventory for the community. He has been able to essentially knock off some lights that we shouldn't have really been dealing with because they were just in the inventory for so long that nobody really had the time or the vision to look into it. So we've actually reduced the number of lease lights just by allocating the proper resources. So some of them were in the regional district, some of them were actually on First Nations lands, etc. So they have now been taken off of our inventory. And what Tim is now focusing on is developing a strategy to replace any of our city-owned lights with the new LEDs. And we've done a number of them. As you can see through the report, there was a number of projects where we were able to, capital projects where we were able to install new ones. And then we did install 79 new LEDs based on some leftover money in a capital project. So we're seeing, operationally, we're going to be seeing some savings, close to about $8,000 a year. It doesn't sound like a lot, but it does add up. And the more that we replace, the more savings we will see. So we will be proposing a budget of approximately $10,000 in the 2021 budget to essentially, with the recommendation to take the money that we're saving right now to increase our replacements. There is a huge savings in wattage for these LEDs, as well as by replacing them with our capital projects, we get rid of the lease lights. And BC Hydro has now announced that they will be moving forward with their LED project, but they have also indicated to us that they're going to increase their rates over the next 4 years to help pay for these replacement costs, because the existing high pressure sodium lights that they have, the pole lights, they haven't outlived their life expectancy, so they are trying to recoup some of that that cost as well. So it'll be borne by us, but in the long run, again, it'll help us because that will eventually lower our electrical costs. So in the motion, we are asking for City Council to support staff in taking the savings that we are seeing now and reallocating that to an annual LED conversion program.
Thank you very much for the report. I see Councillor Elias's comments that he's supportive of the motion. Any other comments from councillors?
I pressed my button.
Do you want to press again because your light didn't come up? All right, go ahead, Councillor Cannon.
So I totally support this.
Just press that again so your light comes on. There we go.
I totally support this. Glad that we're moving towards LED lighting, but I just had a question in regards to like doing the inventory and taking out ones that are on First Nations or CSRD property. Are we looking at the technology of where solar could work in certain areas with LED?
Director of Engineering and Public Works.
Your Worship, they haven't really come up with a suitable solar light for street lighting yet, but we are looking at the technology for instance, Blackburn Park along the walking path. That'll be another budget item that you'll see this year is we would like to install some solar lighting through Blackburn. Potentially some solar lighting through McGuire Lake as well in the future. Yeah, we'll use Blackburn as a test project for us, but we are looking at that technology as well.
Okay, and there's not, street lights that are solar yet. I thought I saw some at UBCM last year.
Your worship, they do have them. It's just that we have to be careful with how many versions of lights we have. We have to keep our specifications to a workable amount. And again, it goes back to the discussion in the last report, is that because of the trees and the elevation and the valleys and whatnot that we have in the community, it's very difficult to install solar, because sometimes you won't be getting that solar light. So we're focusing on our parks for now. And then as we move forward, so what we're doing really is we're just changing out the heads. We're leaving the poles, changing the heads. So there is an opportunity in the future, if they come up with good technology, that we could do that as well.
Okay, great, thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Cannon. Councillor Lindgren.
Thank you. So I'm really happy we're changing these out. I think LED is definitely the way to go, and I'm happy to see it's moving along so fast. I just had one question from someone in the public that I couldn't answer the other day, and that was that I guess we're using the cold white lights everywhere, and the person complained that it was not a very welcoming light, and I'm just wondering if I didn't have an answer as to why we've gone that way instead of the warm yellow, and I wondered if somebody could help me out.
Director of Engineering and Public Works.
I'm not sure I can answer that. It is called a warm white light, so that is what we're using. But everybody sees the light differently, and these are the ones that are recommended. These are also the same lights that are being recommended by the Ministry of Transportation. And one of the issues that we have is the spacing of the poles. So we're replacing the lights on old pole spacings, and so we need the light to be sufficient for coverage. So that's probably another reason why that color was chosen.
Thank you. I see no other questions, so I'll call the question on the motion. All those in favor? That passes unanimously. Thank you very much. We'll go to item 9.4, Director of Development Services, temporary expanded service areas for liquor license extensions. We have a move by Councillor Flynn, seconded by Councillor Lindgren. I'll ask the Director of Development Services to explain his report.
Your Worship, the Liquor and Cannabis Regulation Branch is the provincial body that approves and reviews liquor licenses. Prior to June 8th of this year, liquor license applications that involved structural changes within a premise or even off the premise, those applications still went to the province, and then they were referred to city councils and I guess regional boards for consideration, support or not. So back in June, council supported Policy Directive 20-13, which was an effort by the province to allow for expanded service areas, increasing the size of liquor establishments, all in an effort to increase space between patrons during COVID. And now the LCRB are looking at expanding the same program so it would expire at the end of October of next year, 2021, whereas policy 20-13 expires at the end of this October. So they're looking for a resolution from council.
Great, thank you very much. So just to extend what we've already passed, but for one more year. Okay, councillors, any questions for staff? Councillor Flynn.
Thank you, Worship. I'm very much in support of this. I just had a question. The conclusion is, given there will be no increase in the occupant load and that this is a temporary measure with a definite expiration date, the expiration date applies to the new legislation. That paragraph is not suggesting that at the end of October 31st, 2021, we have to undo and tear down anything that was done. Does staff know the answer to that? Because it's up to the province.
Your Worship, that's correct. It's up to the province.
Yeah.
Yeah, this policy directive, this new one, would continue to take us, the city, out of the picture of licensing liquor establishments, which in our opinion as staff, we think that's the right thing to do.
Good thing. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Flynn. Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? That passes unanimously. Thank you. Item 9.5, Director of Development Services, BC Restaurant and Food Service Association correspondence. There's no motion attached to this. It's for your information. I'll ask the Director of Development Services to go over the information for us.
Your Worship, at the September 14th regular council meeting, council briefly reviewed the letter from the BC Restaurant and Food Services Association. That letter is attached to this report, and Mayor Harrison, you requested a report from myself, and so I put this together.
Great, thank you very much. Appreciate that. Others may have questions, but I appreciated the report. So the way I understand it, the patios come down by October 31st to May 1st. Is that right?
That's right. At the end of October, the 2 street side patios that have permits from the city are supposed to come down off the street. And staff is recommending that that happen for a number of reasons. There's 3 reasons mentioned on the second page of the report. Mostly, I would say, due to operational and street maintenance, snow clearing, and that type of thing. That's the primary reason why we recommend that there is an end date this year on the patios. We only have 2 patios in Salmon Arm on the street. Vancouver has over 350. So I think the authors of this letter, this is a very Vancouver-centric letter. And I know council is aware of the COVID crisis. We have no illusions of the challenges that it's playing on businesses. We have streamlined patio approvals, and we feel that we have done a great job in that regard.
Yes, thank you for that. And I understand the dates given our climate, and the one outside the pie company has already been removed. So thinking of winter coming. The other question I have is, on May the 1st, the ones that are there already, or are there now, that will come down before October 31st at Hanoi and the Pie Company, do they have to reapply, or can they just go ahead?
Your Worship, technically they have to reapply. So if council wishes to expand this approval for the 2, you should make that resolution so that staff knows.
Okay, well, I would like to make that resolution that the 2 that have been agreed to by staff and council, Hanoi and the Pie Company, do not have to reapply and can put back up their patios on May the 1st. Okay, thank you. Councillor Flynn, second. I won't discuss my reasons for it. I think I've kind of talked a little bit about that, and the report talks a bit to it. We want to make it as easy as we can for businesses, and those are already proven. And so they've already paid their damage deposit. I think it just makes it easier if they don't have to reapply. Councillor Flynn.
Just from a logistics point of view, I would ask if we're going to grandfather them, then I guess we should keep their damage deposit. Does that make sense, in order to let them just come back in the spring? If they want their damage deposit back, then they got to go through the process, I would think.
Let's just check with staff and see how they see it as working. Director of Development Services, sounds like it makes sense what Councillor Flynn had to say.
Your Worship, I suppose if they request the damage deposit back after the patio is removed, we could return it to them, but then they would have to give it back to us in May. And the other piece that may be missing from this conversation is other businesses that want to apply for a patio next year. Will they be exempt from the fees?
So we have a motion on the floor right now. Why don't we finish that motion off, and then if council wishes to discuss the next, we could. My feeling is that the people who have patios up now, who have applied and got them ready and have them built, should be at the front of the queue for next year, so that they don't get left out should two others on the street want to put them up. So that's the reason for my motion. Councillor Lavery has a question, and it's around what we just talked about regarding others who might apply. So Councillor Lavery, did you want to speak to that, or do you want to wait till we vote on this motion?
Yes, thanks, Mayor Harrison. I support the motion as it is. I'm fine with the subsequent discussion, which I think might be a motion, but might just be signaling to others who might apply that what the process would be by early spring.
Okay, after we vote on this motion, I'll come back to you. Is there any other speakers to the present motion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? That passes unanimously. Thank you. Councillor Lavery, I'll turn it over to you.
Yes, Your Worship, thanks. I'll leave it up to you about whether it's a motion or not. I'm just thinking that we need to signal probably through downtown Salmon Arm and to our businesses downtown that we're prepared to consider expansion. I don't know if we have the criteria quite yet, but that by February, and again, staff could indicate what that timelines could be, that an application process would be considered.
Okay, and Councillor Lavery, can I just ask you, the other piece that the director had asked about was that application, the application presently, we waive 2 of the fees. Are you suggesting that we do the same or consider the same and get that out in February?
Yeah, I without a doubt, thank you, Worship. I think that we're targeted on this re-upping of the 2 right now. I think that's good. I think that we need just to put together a tight package available to businesses downtown that consider it, and that would all be part of that.
Okay, thank you. So, Director of Development Services, does that sound reasonable? Rather than make a motion today regarding the waiving of the fees in February, if we could get a report from your department just about that, and also including a look at the number of patios per street and anything else that you feel would be important.
Yes, Your Worship, we can do that.
Okay, all right. Councillor Flynn.
I was just going to say, as the DSA rep, I don't think we should rush this decision today, or I think what you've done is the right thing. Let's deal with it in the spring. Maybe there'll be a cure, COVID will be gone, and we'll be back to normal. I doubt it, but I think we can deal with that in the spring.
Yeah, fair comment. Thank you for making that as the rep. All right, we will move on then, having dealt with that motion. We're at introduction of bylaws, City of Salmon Arm permissive tax exemption bylaw number 4415, first, second, and third reading. We have a proposed motion. If I could have a mover and a seconder. Councillor Cannon moves it. Councillor Lindgren seconds. Thank you very much. I'll ask our acting chief financial officer, who's on with us today, to speak to the report.
Thank you, Your Worship. The bylaw for consideration will grant permissive tax exemptions for a 2-year period, 2021 and 2022. It is important to note that pursuant to the community charter, council has the discretion to set the criteria to which tax exemptions are granted and the associated amount. There is no obligation to grant an exemption. Historically, council has granted a permissive tax exemption to churches for the remaining property not covered by a statutory exemption of up to 2 acres. For societies, senior facilities, and sports clubs, council has granted an exemption for all land and improvements provided they are owned by a charitable or not-for-profit organization. 3 applications have been provided for your review. The Cornerstone Christian Reformed Church recently consolidated 2 properties. As a result, BC Assessment Authority deleted the previous property from the 2021 assessment roll and assigned 1 new property roll number, PID, and advised by BC Assessment, previous permissive exemption granted by council will not transfer to the newly created property roll number unless authorized by council by bylaw. The Cornerstone Christian Reformed Church did not submit a formal application for council's consideration. However, it is recommended that council grant their permissive exemption on the newly created property for 2021 and 2022. Canadian Mental Health Association is in the process of construction of affordable housing rental units and supportive housing units on the property located at 540 3rd Street Southwest. Council has granted permissive tax exemptions for other properties owned by the Canadian Mental Health Association for the 3-year period. The land and improvements are owned by the Canadian Mental Health Association, a registered society in good standing, in accordance with Section 2242A of the Community Charter, and the properties are used for the purpose that is directly related to the purposes of the association. The last application is due to an administrative error during the preparation of bylaw 4352. Lakeside Community Church located at 391 Hudson Avenue Northeast was removed from the bylaw. Lakeside Community Church did not submit a formal application for council's consideration. However, it is recommended that council grant a permissive exemption for 2021 and 2022 based on the original application provided in 2019. This bylaw must be adopted by October 31st, 2020, to be in effect for the 2021 tax year. Therefore, it is recommended that council adopt bylaw number 4415 to exempt the subject properties for the 2021 and 2022 year.
Great, thank you very much. I'll open it up to council for questions. Councillor Flynn.
Thank you, Worship. Just a question on the first one. I'm a little confused by the first paragraph on page 2 of the report, which is 63 in our agenda. They are now going to pay taxes on 0.563 acres now after the consolidation, and we're paying taxes on 0.284 acres. Is that correct?
Chief Financial Officer.
No, so in 2020, the property was slightly smaller and they paid tax on 2.84 acres. And now that the two properties have been consolidated, the property is slightly larger. They would now pay property taxes on 0.563 of an acre.
Okay. So actually, that's what I thought. The property is larger, they get an exemption for 2 acres, and they pay tax on 0.563 acres.
Yes, that is correct.
So my question is, that 2 acres, that's our bylaw or policy? And they get the statutory exemption, which we don't control from the province. We can control the permissive. How did we determine the 2 acres additional over and above the statutory for the church and land?
Chief Financial Officer, do you know the answer to that question?
Probably before any of our time, so you may not know the answer.
I believe it's been in the policy for quite a number of years that worded that way.
So is that intended to cover parking, reasonable parking and reasonable space being used by the church?
That's my understanding, yes.
And the 2 acres is intended to not make it too big. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Flynn. Councillor Lindgren.
Thanks. Just a question about Lakeside Community Church. I obviously should have mentioned this beforehand, but I have membership there, and I don't know if I'm allowed to ask questions about that.
You want to check
if I
with
should
the
even be
CAO
here.
and see if you're in conflict or not? Chief Administrative Officer.
Your Worship, unless Council Lindgren is on some kind of board of directors there, then I would say no, you're not.
Okay, in that case, I have a question. So Lakeside leases that property, they don't own it. Are they responsible for the taxes, or does this tax exemption then go to the person who owns the building?
Chief Financial Officer.
So a portion of the building that the church is in is assessed as Class 8, which is nonprofit church.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Is there any other questions on this item? Okay, I just have one question for the director regarding the Cornerstone Christian Reformed Church. So right now it's one property. I see that the piece on the south side of 11th is presently for sale. My question is it also suggests a different zone. I'm assuming that the church would have to subdivide that piece off in order to rezone that piece. Is that correct?
Your worship, is that question to me or?
Yes, please.
Okay. So the south side of 11th Avenue Northeast is hooked to the north side across 11th Avenue. So it's still part of the same property. It is not zoned C6. It's still zoned P3. There's an application to rezone it to C6, and that's coming to council next council meeting for first and second reading. There's also an application to subdivide or unhook that southern portion.
Okay, so my question then to the Chief Financial Officer is, if that piece on the south side of 11th is subdivided, whether it's rezoned or not, does the permissive tax exemption then not apply to it?
Through your worship, if BC assessment gives the property a new roll number and a new roll number to that subdivided piece, the church would then have to apply on that new piece as well if they still own it.
Okay, so just to clarify with you, if they still own it and it becomes its own independent piece, the BC Assessment Authority would give it its own roll number, would they not?
Yes, they would.
Okay, I just don't want to get in a position where it's C6 and it's separated and they somehow have a permissive tax exemption. All right. Any other questions? I will call a question, and all those in favor? Thank you. That passes unanimously. We're now to item 11, reconsideration of bylaws. I will let the people in the or online with us know that the fire chief is in the gallery, as this is a final reading of a bylaw that he brought forward. City of Salmon Arm Fire Department and Fire Prevention Amendment Bylaw number 4416, final reading. We have a proposed motion moved by Councillor Flynn, seconded by Councillor Lindgren. Fire Chief, do you wish to speak to this before we vote?
No, thank you.
Okay, I think council has had ample time to understand, but I will give them opportunity to ask any questions they have. Councillors, do you have any questions for the Fire Chief? Seeing none, I will call the question. All those in favor? It passes unanimously. Thank you. We will go on to correspondence. Item 12.1 is informational correspondence. We'll look after the items that are from 1 to 13. So if you wish to speak to any of those, please indicate so. I'll ask one more time and then we'll move on. Is there anyone wishing to speak to any of the informational correspondence items? Councillor Wallace Richmond, item 5 and 6.
Thanks, Your Worship. I'm to acknowledge receipt a letter from Lindsay Wong, manager of downtown Salmon Arm, regarding disturbances downtown. Ms. Wong and I have had an opportunity to chat on the phone prior to the letter. It's my information that the work of homeless outreach will be ramping up soon to have the contract with Canadian Mental Health. I'd like to have this letter forwarded to the Social Impact Advisory Committee, and then finally I would say it's never a good day when someone has a bad experience in the downtown, whether you're witnessing it or living it yourself. And a lot of work has been done to help our vulnerable populations as much as we are able and people are willing. But I will also use this as a reminder to say that it can be very challenging to resource a solution to a problem without having good records and good data and that sort of thing. So whether it's a compliment or a complaint or a concern, it's important for people to write in, to call in, so that that information can be collected so that we can resource solutions to problems. So yeah, so if you wouldn't mind, I would like to send that on to the Social Impact Advisory Committee for their next meeting.
Thank you, Councillor Wallace Richmond. We will forward that to the Social Impact Committee, and thank you for your work with the outreach resource. Much appreciated. Would you like to go on to number 6?
Yes, item 6, Your Worship. This is going up here. No, in the wrong spot. So there is an extension request for, what am I? Open until October 31st. That would sort of line up and when the patios have to be gone. Wondering if I would like to make a motion that we keep the downtown market open until October 31st.
Thank you. It's seconded by Councillor Eliason. Do you wish to speak to it further, Councillor Wallace Richmond?
Well, I have to say, for something that it's basically in its infancy in terms of what a market is, and yes, COVID made it further complicated, but also more popular. This has been an extraordinary success and probably our favorite part of Saturday. So I hope council will support.
Does anyone else wish to speak to that motion before I call the question? Okay, I'll call the question and all those in favor. Thank you very much. We all agree with you, Councillor Wallace Richmond, and many thanks to Serena Kainer. Councillor Wallace Richmond, is there any other items you wish to speak to?
No, thanks, Your Worship, not at this time.
Okay, thank you. I'll forward it to Councillor Flynn.
Thank you, Worship. And Councillor Wallace Richmond, related to item 5, has the Social Impact Advisory Committee got a way for people to report concerns? I'm clearly going to take this back to DSA if you think I should, and ask them to formalize a process for business owners, residents to at least acknowledge an issue so that we are keeping track, because I agree with you, we need data. Are you comfortable with me asking DSA to have some type of method to record? And will the Social Impact Advisory Committee have something for set up?
Well, perhaps my esteemed colleague, we could invite Lindsay to our social impact meeting. We had some discussions prior to COVID, so we could come up with some sort of action item and see where it goes from there. But yeah, Lindsay and I have spoken about it.
Okay, that's great. Then you and I can talk after. Thank you. I did have a question as well on item 1 and 2. And again, I need a reminder of the process for benches, because I think they're full. And then secondly, that's item 1. And then item 2 is we're seeing a number of requests to council for the new wonderful shelter in the park. Are we going to set up a process where those don't have to come to council, or are they always going to come to council?
Okay, we will look after both your questions. We'll start with number 1, the bench request at McGuire, Memorial bench request at McGuire Lake. Now, I'll ask the Director of Engineering and Public Works if he would speak to that. Your
Worship, this has come up on many occasions, and a number of years ago, I believe it was 2011, the city decided, City Council approved the memorial walkway in McGuire Lake, and one of the reasons was we're inundating our parks with benches, and therefore the walkway was found to be a suitable solution for memorializing individuals who wanted to essentially use that service. So from staff's perspective, we would not recommend any more benches in our parks, and that we would forward these on to the Memorial Walkway.
Thank you. Councillor Flynn, did you wish to follow up with that question?
No, that's kind of what I thought the answer was, but I'm assuming staff will let these people, the writer of the letter, know the process?
Yes, staff will communicate with them. Thank you very much.
The writer of the letter. Did I say letter of the writer?
All right, and your other question was around items 2 and 3, request for the Blackburn Park picnic shelter, and I'll ask the corporate officer to answer that question. Is there going to be a process so that all of these don't have to come to council?
Thank you, Your Worship. Yes, that is staff's intention to craft a procedure and also work with Shuswap Recreation Society to start booking the picnic shelter through their system. This is something that has been in discussion for quite a number of years now about actually having some clear guidelines for rentals and whether or not these things even need to come to council, and sort of we're in the process of developing a matrix so that maybe more controversial items would come, but regular birthday parties and things of that nature would definitely not get onto the agenda.
Councillor Flynn, do you wish to follow up?
So will that be some type of bylaw or policy that we would then approve, and what the rental fee would be and things like that?
That's correct.
Because I mean, I see one here is for a memorial service, and of course if family wanted to have it there, but we are then competing with places that typically provide facilities for memorial services at a fee. I think we have to come up with a fair policy and a fair rate.
Thank you, Councillor Flynn. Can I just ask the corporate officer, is it staff's recommendation, given that we don't have a policy and the COVID times, that council pass a motion to allow items 2 and 3 to take place in the gazebo?
Your Worship, it is staff's recommendation that item 2 be approved. Council did grant authority for someone to do the same thing at Canoe Beach on another occasion. And this is a small gathering that the person had already secured insurance for. Staff did indicate that it needed to receive council approval, but we do know that they preemptively got insurance, so we know that is already sorted out. With respect to item number 3, staff have had a number of inquiries over the years about for-profit fitness companies using the city facilities to host their events, and at this point we have not permitted anyone with an actual business to do that. So number 3 would be something outside of the norm, and staff do not recommend doing that at this time.
Thank you. Councillor Flynn, would you be willing to make the motion for number 2?
I will make the motion for number 2, making sure that they make it very clear that they have to meet COVID guidelines.
Thank you. Is there a seconder for that motion? Councillor Lindgren. Councillor Flynn, do you wish to speak further to it?
I think it's pretty self-explanatory, and I want to make it clear that I was not including 3 in the same items as 2. I think they're totally different, so.
Okay, I think Councillor Lavery would also like to speak to this motion. So Councillor Lavery, do you wish to speak to the motion?
No, thanks, Your Worship.
Okay. Oh, he was going to make the motion. All right. Thank you. Then if there's no other speakers to it, I will call the question for item 2. All those in favor? Great, that passes unanimously. Councillor Flynn, do you have any other items?
I'd just like to quickly speak to item 3.
Okay, and then I think item 4 might be your item as well.
Really?
Yep. But let's go ahead with 3.
Okay, yeah. So item 3, I was definitely concerned about this one. Now, this is asking for a full year of use. It sounds like how many times? 10 to 12 ladies per day, Tuesdays and Thursdays. So this is a private business that I believe will be charging those ladies. I do not support this at this point in time, even though I think outside fitness classes might be a really good thing in COVID. And this has a time sensitivity, I guess I'd like to hear from others, but as staff has said, we've never allowed private businesses to rent facilities like this to run sessions. That being said, I think in COVID, we might be wanting to help private businesses and have some creativity or flexibility, so I'd like to hear what others have to say.
Okay, thank you. Any others besides Councillor Eliason, who's put forward his comments for item 3, are welcome. In the meantime, would you like to speak about item 4, Councillor Flynn?
Sure. Thank you for making sure.
Just press your button again. Go ahead.
Obviously, the downtown light up is still going to occur, socially distanced. I agree with Councillor Wallace Richmond's comments about how successful the market has been and also the Alexander Street closures. So we would like to ask that council support the light up and winter bonfire night on November 28th, and I will make that motion.
Thank you, Councillor Flynn. Can I just ask in the motion, I believe the letter asked to close Alexander all day, and I just wondered if that is necessary with the light up.
I have a DSA meeting next Wednesday, or the Wednesday after, sorry. I can check on that if that's what council, that's what's been asked for, but I don't know why they want it so early. So I can look into that.
Yes, would you please? Because you know, if it's going to be closed all day and there's events all day, that's one thing. Yeah. But as you understand. Okay, so how would you like to word the motion?
Improve in principle, subject to understanding the exact hours. Closure of Alexander Street for November 28th for the bonfire night.
Thank you. Is there a seconder to that motion? Councillor Lindgren. Okay. That's, does anyone else want to speak to the motion regarding number 4? Okay, all those in favor? That passes unanimously.
Is there anything else I missed?
No. If we could just scroll up just a little bit, Corporate Officer, just so I could, on the chat line, I think I might have missed somebody.
Chad, 332.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Eliason, for your comment on number 3, and Councillor Wallace Richmond would also like to comment on number 3. Go ahead, Councillor Wallace Richmond.
Your Worship, we're nearing the end of the season, and I have been at the park on several occasions when those fitness classes are happening. I just would like us to lend a thought to the people who are participating in that course, and perhaps suggest that we put a deadline on this thing effective November 1st. For example, there will be no for-profit bookings in the Rotary Gazebo or something like that. So, I mean, it's going to be disruptive, but at least if it can be slightly organized disruption, I think that would be a bit more appreciate the sort of situation that people found themselves in, and there's a great deal of joy in that space when that's happening. So I'm sure it's not coming from a place of bad intention.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Wallace Richmond. Could I just want to make sure I understand. So there's no motion on the floor presently, which means the people in item 3 do not have permission to use the picnic shelter. What you're suggesting is that we not restrict use of the shelter until after November 1st. Do I understand that right?
Your Worship, just that it be in terms of staff developing their policy, that it would be thoughtful to remember that there's only a couple of weeks left, and whatever we do should be effective of a certain date, just so there's some sort of order in the chaos, I guess. But it's mostly a suggestion. It's certainly not meant to be a motion.
Okay, and I think staff can take that direction. Yes, thank you very much for that. All right, any other items? Councillor Cannon.
No, I'm good, thanks.
Okay. Councillor Eliason, item 10, Did you want to speak to it, Councillor Lyson? I see you say staff will be working with CSRD to see if we can get funding for our organics program. Do you want to just speak to that for us?
I'm just wondering if there's money available for us expanding our composting with that money that was just announced. I'll leave with staff if they have anything or have any ideas.
Okay, I'll ask the Director of Engineering and Public Works. It looks like they may want to look at that. Would you like to comment?
I don't really have a comment right now because we've been looking at a number of things. They've been coming out like lots of them over the last 2 weeks. So we really don't have any comment on what we could put forward for that.
Okay, is that something that you could look at?
Definitely.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Lyson, for bringing it up.
Yeah, my only thought is that at the landfill, and Councillor Flynn will be into this as well, is that we're looking to expand our organic actual transfer and treatment and maybe a composting facility there. So it might bump up our timeline of having that organic composting facility at Salmon landfill. That's all.
Okay, no, understand. Okay, thank you very much. I think we've exhausted the informational correspondence on that page. Thank you, councillors. We'll go to item 12.2, item from Mike Simpson, Program Manager, Shuswap Watershed Council, regarding draft contribution. I'll open it up. First of all, Councillor Flynn, who's CSRD Chair.
Actually, I think I would like to ask Councillor Lavery to speak to it first as Vice Chair of Shuswap Watershed Council.
Okay, Councillor Lavery, would you like to speak to that item first?
Yeah, thanks, Your Worship. If we could go to page, I don't have my supplemental documents available, but I see it's right there now. Thank you. So the bottom line on this is that the reserves that the Shuswap Watershed Council had been accumulating to a point where they were excessive. That one of the reasons for that then growing was that the council was not able to find appropriate projects to invest money in phosphorus reducing programs. So the decision was made to reduce the reserve funds for the year 2021 only by $100,000, prorated proportionally across the board for all funders. And the idea will be that 2022 and 2023 will revert back to the funding formula that was currently in place. So that's a fairly significant reduction for what Salmon will have to pay into it. I would also note that this past current year, projects have been identified, and we're expecting that there will be projects that will directly implement reduction in phosphorus contribution to the Salmon River we follow this, I'll just see what happens, but this snapshot here right now, a reduction in fees for 2021.
Great, thank you, Councillor Lavery. Councillor Flynn, did you wish to add to that?
Yeah, I would like to. Thank you, Councillor Lavery. And I just wanted to remind everybody that the CSRD and the Watershed Council working together did get approval to extend the mandate for 3 years without going to either referendum or alternative approval. The minister agreed that we could not do a referendum in these times due to safety reasons, so we didn't. But they did extend the Shuswap Watershed Council mandate for 3 years. And the Watershed Council, in looking at their finances and their significant reserve, which they hope to spend on mitigation or grant programs in the future, recognized that it wouldn't hurt any of us to have a reduction in our contribution. So we are seeing about a $16,000 savings next year. And I commend the Watershed Council for listening to the contributors and for making some adjustments in what's going to be a difficult time next year, recognizing that they got approval moving forward without going through referendum. So I think this is good news all around, and thank the Watershed Council for their work. And it's interesting, I was just reading a letter that I am sending to the Minister Heyman on behalf of CSRD and the Watershed Council with regards to the unprecedented algae bloom and our request to the province to help look at the causes and help look at funding for people who want to reduce phosphorus impacts. So very timely, and thank you to everybody involved. I think it's a positive letter.
Thank you, Councillor Flynn. Councillor Cannon.
Thank you. I think that Councillor Flynn answered. I just wanted to know what the Shuswap watershed was going to, what action they were going to take in regards to the unprecedented algae bloom that we experienced in our bay this year. And I know myself, I think because I'm a city councillor, I had so many phone calls about the algae bloom in the bay, and I know our Director of Engineering and Public Works had lots of emails and phone calls in regards to that too. So I think if we somehow put the pressure with that letter that Councillor Flynn said is going out, so we can get some answers as to why we experienced that algae bloom. And I think especially with the amount of money that's been carried over every year, it's nice that they're recognizing that and hopefully going to be able to use that to possibly get data or figure out why we had that algae bloom. Because I think, you know, it was pretty crazy. People have never seen that before in this bay, and it lasted the whole summer.
Thank you, Councillor Cannon. And thank you, Councillor Flynn, and as well, Councillor Lavery, for your work with the Shuswap Watershed Council.
Could I make a comment on that, please?
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, and thanks, Councillor Cannon. I was going to bring this up in council statements, but to anybody living in Shuswap, this algae bloom has and should have everyone's knees knocking about what it means. It is still unclear, although there are factors involved are kind of identified, but they're not fully identified as to what the exact cause was. But this is the significant thing. The Shuswap Watershed Council projects, while they're started and were granted this year, are small potatoes in this whole thing. They're actually very good because they're helping local projects with the contribution load. But the overall problem lies entirely with the government. And that Councillor Finn was referring to an upcoming letter that the local representatives of the Ministry of Environment and the Ministry of Agriculture are doing a tremendous amount of work in forming the Watershed Council and going back to the ministry. But the reality is that more action is needed immediately. And an example of that is that nutrient management plans are in place to start to deal with this. But they're not slated to take effect in our watershed until 2015.
25.
So there is an active, and I would urge, we have a provincial election coming up. I think it's a great question for a provincial candidate to bring up this nutrient management, the algal bloom, and to say, can we speed up the timing of the regulations of nutrient management? Can there be incentivization for those who are the worst offenders? And that is a responsibility, but we need to nip this in the bud as quickly as possible. And I would urge, actually, anybody listening to this, contact your government, indicate your concern, because this is a harbinger of that has everyone worried.
Thank you, Councillor Lavery. Councillor Flynn.
Yeah, I haven't signed this letter. I just authorized my electronic signature to go on, but I'm just going to read two paragraphs related to Councillor Cannon's comments and Councillor Lavery's. At present time, the Code of Practice places an emphasis on reduction of nitrates, and while this is important, the threat of another large algae bloom is driven by phosphorus. The requirement for agriculture within phosphorus-affected areas to have and follow a nutrient management plan comes into effect in the spring of 2025. We think phosphorus-affected areas, such as the Shuswap watershed, need more immediate intervention. That's the message Councillor Lavery just said. And then the second part of that is managing nutrients is costly, and local farmers are challenged with this. We are especially sympathetic to those who wish to proactively, voluntarily implement new on-farm measures to protect water quality. Financial incentives from the province would be helpful to encourage early adoption of such measures. So the letter that I have, I'd like to say I've authored, but somebody authored and I'm putting my signature on, is going to the Minister of Environment tomorrow. So Councillor Lavery has a very good point. It was unprecedented. I think personally it was because of the long spring of high water and sitting water, but I'm not a scientist, and there's been a ton of scientific work done by the Watershed Council working with Okanagan UBCO, and I may bring this back to our table for us to send a letter as well.
Great, thank you very much, Councillor Flynn. Thanks for sharing the letter too. I think the council would endorse that. Councillor Cannon.
I just wanted to kind of.
Sorry, Councillor Cannon, press that button again. Yep.
That, I mean, I wonder if there would be an appetite to possibly have kind of the Shuswap watershed and then have kind of a working committee on this algae bloom issue. As I said previously, I literally have had like so many phone calls on it over the summer, perhaps because I live on the lake. And I know of 6 people, very well-educated people with, you know, biology and scientific backgrounds that were interested in getting involved with really getting into the roots of this algae bloom in our area, which, you know, maybe the Shuswap watershed might be interested in discussing this, because I think as this letter sounds great, I think 2025 is, you know, a long ways out. And if we have another algae bloom like we had this past summer that lasts the whole summer, I mean, I think the alarm bells are going to be going off twofold next spring. I mean, I was kayaking on the water, and I had people coming over to me and saying, "Do you live here?" And I was like, they were like, "What's going on with this watercolor?" And like I said before, I had lots of local people with very well educated that want to get involved with a committee to work on why are we experiencing this unprecedented algae bloom. So I guess maybe that could go back to the Shuswap watershed, CSRD, and perhaps we could look at starting a committee that just wants to work on that and lobbying the provincial government.
Thank you for sharing that idea, Councillor Cannon. Any other discussion on this item? Okay, thank you very much, and thank you for explaining as well the budgetary piece.
Your Worship, I think we're looking for a motion to approve the Watershed Council draft contribution agreement.
Okay. Councillor Lavery, would you be willing to move that?
Yes, Your Worship, I will. I would, but it is a draft at this stage.
Okay, and I think that's what you, yes, yeah, that's included in the motion. Thank you. Seconded by Councillor Cannon. I think we've had quite a bit of discussion. All those in favor? Wait for the folks who are online with us, if you could record your vote under the chat line. Oh, I think we have to pull the cursor down. Aha. Thank you, and Councillor Eliason, your comments are appreciated. That motion passes unanimously. Okay, let's go to item 12.3, Federation of Canadian Municipalities Virtual Conference. That's just for council's information. If you're interested in registering, we'd have a budget line for that. I think you would see Kaylee. Do we need a motion, CEO, for that?
Yes.
Okay. Is there anyone who is interested in registering for the FCM online? Okay, Councillor Flynn.
I am interested in this because I think the online registration for this is where I felt UBCM should have been, $70 or $80 or $100. I will participate in some of the sessions, not all of them, but I think for online events, this is a reasonable cost. I'm reading it as $70 because we're members,
Yes.
and I will plan to attend at that rate.
Okay, we just need the names of people so we can make the motion. Councillor Lavery, you have a question?
Yes, thanks, Your Worship, and I don't, and I guess I need to clarify this, but I don't think this is the regular FCM conference. This is the Sustainable Communities Conference, and so I'm unsure whether the regular FCM conference is being billed as Sustainable Communities, but I do know there has been an annual Sustainable Communities conference that I've dearly loved to gone to. So I guess if we could put our names forward, but I'm not thinking this is the regular FCM convening. It may be an opportunity about sustainable communities that I've always wanted to go to, but couldn't justify the cost of asking to go to. So I'm unsure of this at this stage. I'm thinking it's the latter. I think it's the annual sustainable community. I'd be interested in participating on that.
Councillor Lavery is correct. It's not FCM.
So, Councillor Lavery, thank you for that clarification. It is not the FCM, so we won't entertain a motion on this presently. If any councillor, just like any other conference, is interested, then they can bring that to council for council's endorsement. Councillor Flynn, do you wish to?
Can I just make a motion in principle, because the deadlines are coming up here fairly quickly, that council approve in principle anybody who wants to virtually attend the Sustainable Communities Conference with the money being taken out of council initiatives.
Sure, I'll accept that motion. Councillor Cannon seconds it. And then anyone interested can just see Kaylee and the motion will cover it. All those in favor of that motion? Great, thank you very much, and thanks for your clarification on that.
Yes, thank you.
All right, we're going to move forward then, and thank you to our presenters for hanging on with us. Sorry we're a little bit late. Welcome, Terry. Great to have you here. Terry's going to talk to us about Sketson Silvertech Ventures and Sconliffe Indian Bands with Brad Shirley. So I'll turn it over to you, gentlemen, and then there may be a motion to follow. Sure, come on forward to the microphone, Terry, once you're hooked up there, and I'm not sure, Brad, if you're a part of this or just there for questions. I'm going to speak after Terry. Okay, you guys have got it figured out. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you, councillors and staff, for having me in today. So we'll bring the map up and it'll be easiest to address that. It will be the file that says LM 8.5 by 11. That's the one. Yep. Okay. So we are in the process of putting together the proposal for Community Resiliency Investment Program for 2021, as you know. And we spoke with staff members here and Councillor Lavery as well. And basically decided that we would, I think we all agreed that we would continue our focus on Little Mountain and hold off on other areas for now, because this area is the highest priority, probably the biggest hazard in the community. with subdivisions around it and rural properties around it, and given the height of it and the developments that are on it in the way of communications and water and whatnot, we feel that's the highest priority area to work on. And it also is the area that has the most forest issues with it, for forest health issues. So our intent this year is to put in an application that covers the remaining part of TU number 3 there up in the top. You can see we did part of TU number 3. Just get the exact amounts, areas here. Have those with me. Do I? No. So in TU number 3, the second part of that one, TU 3B, TU 6 on top again, and then down towards the bottom, TU number 4 and TU number 5 are the areas that we're trying to focus on if we can get enough budget to do those. And there's a little piece of TU number 2 there. You can see that yellow dot at the bottom. That little piece there, if we can get into it, it's really challenging terrain to get into there. We would be skidding on a side hill, which is difficult to do, but there's no way we can burn in there, and nobody would want that. So we're not sure if we can get into that area or how we will do it, but it won't be easy, put it that way. And even that lower part of TU4 right next to it is going to be similar issues. In order to treat any of that area there, we're going to have to be able to get into the lower part of the park, up towards where the water tanks are, in order to put our bins, in order to chip into those and haul material out, and we're hoping that that will work out as well. We've also spoken with the landowner to the south there, if we can move that map up just a little bit. Or actually, we want to go down, so we want to move the map up. Yeah, that's right, thanks. So you'll see on this, just below TU4 there, there's that large piece of private property. We've spoken with those people. They're quite cooperative in speaking with us, and so we may have to access part of the area through their property, and we'll have further discussions with them. But most of the folks around there are quite cooperative because they understand it's protecting their property as well. So we've had pretty good luck there. Now, if we can go over to the eastern side of the map towards the north again. And yeah, okay, so on that eastern, can we move the map to the left a bit? I think there's room there. I don't know if we can or not. No, it looks like it's got everything on there. Okay, on the left-hand side there is 2 pieces of property, one owned by Gary Hartling and the other owned by Mr. Blackburn, Ed Blackburn. Is it Ed? Anyway, one of the Blackburn brothers. And we've spoken with both of them, and they're willing to work with us also for access into that TU6, and then when we get into TU7 and some of those other areas, they're willing to help us as well get into those areas. So, and then the person to the very north of TU3 and TU6, she's been very cooperative with us, being able to work out that way as well. As far as TU number 1 and 2 and 3 go, we will be having Mike Aldred from the BC Wildfire Service out on Thursday this week to look at those areas. We're going to put in some post-treatment plots to see if we have met the intent of the amount of fuel reduction there. We're not 100% sure. We've taken an awful lot of fuel out of there, but we're not 100% sure on that. So if we do have to take out a bit more in there, we won't be putting the bin beside the tennis building again. We'll put it up in the corner of the parking lot if we have to. But we may have to go back in there and take out a bit more, but we'll stay away from the building if we have to go back in there. Okay, so that's the intent for the 2021 application. Any questions on that before I move on to anything else?
Great, thank you. Thanks, Terry, for explaining that. I'll just see if councillors have any questions on that application for fuel mitigation. I think you explained it very well, seems clear.
Okay. Another topic is Mount Ida. We have been awarded we're in the process of being awarded 2 projects for Mount Ida. Mount Ida, along the base of Mount Ida, will have kind of 2 components to it. One is some logging that has to happen in order to open the area up, create roads, access, and to thin out what we call the L1 or the top canopy layer of the forest. So that's and that's a contract that's being put together by BC Timber Sales, as that's their operating area over there. So that's in the works. The second part of that is a contract with the Ministry of Forests and Natural Resource Operations, which is out of the same office and just down the hallway from BCTS. And they will be issuing us a contract to do the fuel mitigation in the areas that are not going to be logged, and in between and following up on the areas that are going to be logged. So that's the plan for there. BCTS is giving us a contract to first of all do all of the planning and prescription work and layout and everything in that area to figure out the access. The access is going to be tricky in there. There's a fair bit of private land across the bottom. There are some areas of Crown municipal land, which we may need to access through those. We're hoping to use the power line for some access as well, and then we may have to do some access with private landholders to be able to get in there.
The actual logging there and fuel mitigation, that's part of it's all on Crown land there on Mount
It's all
Ida,
on
is that
Crown
right?
land.
Okay.
Yeah, it's Crown provincial land. What was I going to say? There was something else I had for that. It's basically it's a two-step process that we should go through to do this. We really need the cooperation of BC Timber Sales to get the access in there. Oh, I know what I was going to say. The other thing that's making that area difficult is the large draws down it, which makes much more difficult road construction in there. So that's the other issue. But both those are in the works of being awarded to us. We've been told verbally they're coming. And they'll be coming very quickly, like probably within the next week or 2. Okay. The third thing that's happening is we are in the process of putting together a proposal to do treatments on Fly Hills as well. And that is through the Ministry of Forests, Lands and Natural Resource Operations under their what they call WRR program, Wildfire Risk Reduction. And that is the program that has replaced the FES application that we originally put in. So that proposal will be going in the next couple of days. It has to be in by Wednesday. So that's kind of where we're at with these things. And Chief Shirley will probably speak more on inclusion of their group in a lot of the education part. And so we've accomplished getting that happening. So any questions on any of those things?
It's useful to know, Terry, and the piece I know the chief is going to talk about is the 2021 application. And so the motion, should there be one following these presentations, does not include what used to be the FES Crown land application. That's separate from the city, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Yes, the one with the motion that we need is just for CRI.
Okay, thank you very much, and thank you for sharing both. We'll hear from the fire chief, and then we'll open it up to questions. Council Canada, maybe we'll just let the fire chief go, and then we'll open up to either one.
Thank you, Your Worship. So yeah, my portion of the presentation is on the CRI grant and specifically to the education portion of it. So as you are likely aware, the grant is that we apply for is $150,000, And we're looking at, for a number of reasons, taking over that education and fire smart portion of it for our fire department to look after. It's certainly not a reflection of the work that Silvatech has done in the past. Obviously this year with COVID, we've had some challenges of what we initially had planned. And Terry and his group have been very good in the past of including us in that educational portion. So we're on the same page as what we'd like to see within our community here. Given that, we've come up with a budget working with Terry that's around $20,000 for the educational portion that we will look after. We already field many calls regarding the educational portion of it. We've also just recently had discussions with the CSRD and the District of Sicamous, who will also be applying for the CRI grant. And we've agreed to work a lot closer together and collaborating in different proposed events and advertising and workshops and that type of things. So as well, utilizing their respective firefighters for some of the programs, we see doing that as well. Part of our budget includes some education for 2 or 3 of our fire department members to become LFRs, local fire smart representatives. So that gives them the training and the confidence to go onto properties and do the fire smart assessments. So there's a number of things within that budget that I can go into detail if you wish, but I think just the overview of that is probably sufficient.
Thank you very much, Brad. So, yeah, basically the education component for 2021 is shifting over to the fire department.
Correct.
Super. We'll see if there's questions. I think Councillor Cannon has a question for Terry. If you guys want to share the mic, we can do this both at once, perhaps. So, Councillor Cannon, we'll let you go ahead, and then Councillor Lavery also has comments and questions.
Thank you. I guess the question that I had, Terry, is that you said that you're going to get awarded the contract. You're just waiting to hear. So I just the process of it all. So does that go out to RFP, and then you and other maybe forest companies bid on it, and you're just waiting to hear that you're awarded it, or just could you give me some information?
The Mount Ida work is direct awarded. The Fly Hills work is RFP process.
RFP for which one? Sorry?
It's a request for proposal.
Yeah, but which one was RFP?
Fly Hills.
The Fly Hills. Okay, and then Mount Ida is sole, like the timber company or whatever, the timber.
BC Timber Sales.
BC Timber Sales contacts you.
That's a government branch of the Forest Service. And so, yeah, the band has been negotiating with them all along. And because they said what we'll do is we will direct award one of these areas to you. And whichever one's the most important. And Mount Ida is by far the most important to all the First Nations in the area. So that's the one that we awarded.
Okay. So they do it through the First Nations and then...
Well, we are partnered with the First Nations, so... Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cannon. Councillor Lavery.
Yeah, thanks, Your Worship. And I don't want to take a lot of time here, but I think it's really important to talk about how this conversation has changed in the last 3 years. With so many, and I think we've all learned of the different threads going on about the need for mitigating city lands, for the mitigating crown lands, and in terms of fire smart education, on individual properties and agricultural properties. And each of those has got different dynamics, different priorities, and different funding streams. And I have to say for myself, and I think also the council, we were, it was all just one big ball of concern without going forward. And here we are later, about to apply for year 3 of what is the city land application. the early work that was done about Crown land, especially for the fly hills that came out of our FESDC fund. This has been changing left and right as we've gone through. It's bearing fruit here. And a big shout out to Nistalf as well for their work on the Mount Ida, both on, especially with the thinning and the field load mitigation. After 3 years, there's a clarity evolving here of initiatives starting to take place. And I think it's just a tribute to everybody who's been involved. I fully support, and I all of us to do it, especially co-application to go through this gauntlet. I fully support the excellent fuel mitigation work on city land that has been done so far. And again, year one, we came up with a plan and a little bit of work. This year, year two, we've seen significant improvement in Little Mountain, and with more proposed for year three. This is the way to go. And I think that the shifting of the education and training to Salmon Fire Department absolutely makes sense in terms of their abilities to leverage regional opportunities, and those relationships are already there. So this is just the start, and it's a testimony to, again, a lot of hard work, a lot of people as we approach these grants. And I won't urge people to support it, but I certainly, I think we should support it, and I fully do. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lavery. Would you be willing to make the motion that is the draft resolution on the screen?
I'm so pumped to actually make that motion. That would be great. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you, and Councillor Cannon will second it. Anyone wish to speak to the motion? Okay, I echo Councillor Lavery's comments as well. What he failed to mention is that he's actually been the center of all of this learning, because you always need someone to lead. And it's kind of parallels the way the Housing Task Force went. We all learned, we learned together, and as we learned more, and Councillor Lavery was really council's teacher, taking information from the experts. So really appreciate all the work, and I think it's a testimony to Nisconlith, Terry, to you and to the fire chief to be able to work together to put together the 2021 CRI application. So, having said that, I will call the question. All those in favor? That passes unanimously. Thank you very much, both of you. Okay, we'll invite Councillor Flynn back in. And our second presentation is from Lana Fitt, Manager of Salmon Arm Economic Development Society, talking about MRDT 2019 Annual Performance Report. Welcome, Lana. I'm going to give Councillor Lindgren the chair just for a minute because I have to take a brief out, but I'll be back shortly.
I can't reach the floor. Big seat to fill.
Okay, thank you, Council, for allowing me a few minutes today for the agenda. So for this afternoon's meeting, we have the 2019 MRDT Annual Report for your review and consideration. Just a reminder to Council in this process, on an annual basis, the MRDT is required to submit an annual report to the Ministry of Finance and Destination BC, detailing the financial reporting for the year, as well as the tactics that were completed the year prior. So the full report is there for your review. This report has been reviewed and approved already by the MRDT Committee, the SAID's Board of Directors, and City Finance staff as well before coming to Council. Usually you see this report in May. This year we were given a bit of a delay or a reprieve on that due to COVID. So this report is due to be submitted at the end of September. So for this year's report, I'll just kind of touch on the key highlights, some of the financial details, as well as the tactics work complete, and then definitely allow some time for questions at the end as well. First, looking at the financials, and you'll see Appendix 2.1 in your report gives a full financial overview of the activities that happened in 2019. But a quick summary of that, going into 2019, we had surplus or carry forward funds from the previous years of $206,765. We collected MRDT revenue in 2019 totaling $248,666. This included a small amount of just over $5,000 coming from OAP, or short-term vacation rental. So this is our Airbnb component that was added in late 2019. We also have to include in our financial reporting to Destination BC and the Ministry of Finance the funds that the City of Salmon Arm contributes to Shuswap Tourism that relate to MRDT completed projects. So in 2019, that totaled $34,000. So the compiled three revenue sources for 2019 totaled $489,431. Of that amount, $311,550 was expensed out in 2019, leaving surplus funds of $177,811. Of that amount, $107,881 was allocated for reserve projects for 2020. And those projects, about 80% of those projects have now been complete. I can touch on those a little bit in a few minutes. Leaving an unallocated surplus rolling forward from 2019 to 2020 of $69,997, which we were very relieved to have in our possession going into 2020, and I can talk a little bit about what that looks like for this year as well. So I'm just going to quickly review some of the projects that $311,550 funded and which were completed in 2019. So the first is the Destination Event Expansion Initiatives. So this included three main priorities of conducting community event opportunity research and planning, providing support to existing community events to expand the number of event attendees and also the number of days that events are held in our community, and then to expand the number of destination events that are actually occurring in our community and all. So in total, in 2019, we supported 13 community events. Event infrastructure was put in place at Canoe Beach to support future event hosting potential, and this was the electrical install at Canoe Beach. We completed a comprehensive community bid package. This was submitted specifically for the NJAC bid, but even though it wasn't successful for the year that we applied, the template will serve very valuable for us going forward and already has for this year. So more information to come on that as well. And then we also launched an event hosting website. Most of these initiatives were led by our community event coordinator position as well as our marketing coordinator position. Second initiative was Shuswap Trail Planning and Marketing. So each year we contribute supportive funding to different organizations, aligning organizations that are working towards similar goals, and Shuswap Trail Alliance is one of those. So 2019 trail-based priorities for Shuswap Trail Alliance included signage and mapping, new tourism trail signs and their installation, geo-referenced PDF map updates on various websites, and then updating some apps as well with new mapping opportunities. So in total in 2019, supportive funding from MRDT resulted in 83 new trail signs and 1 trailhead kiosk replaced in high-traffic tourism trails. 5 new web-based trail maps were developed to support the attraction of out-of-town community riders. The Shuswap Trail Guide content was updated, and the Shuswap Trails website, the Trail Forks app, the Mountain Biking BC site were all updated as well. 6 kilometers of new destination trails were planned, and then the West Bay Trail Master Plan continues to progress, and a reserve fund has been established to support ongoing planning for that project. The next project was the Shuswap Taste Trail. This is again one of our partnership projects that was led by Shuswap Tourism. Our marketing coordinator worked quite closely with the Shuswap Tourism team on this project. So the Shuswap Taste Trail experience was developed to create awareness and showcase visitor experiences related to our regional agriculture and local food and beverage operations. So specifically, local food and drink producers, farm gate sales, farmers markets, and restaurants were highlighted. So in this project, Taste Trail website landing page and custom itinerary builder were launched. Pre-made Taste Trail itineraries were developed, and then print-based Taste Trail guides with pull-out maps and itineraries were produced. If you haven't seen this guide yet, it's a really, it's a very well-done guide, and we're quite excited about the value it'll bring for sort of foodie attraction going forward. So again, it's web-based on Shuswap Tourism website, or we have print copies in our office, and actually I think the city, there might be some copies here as well. The next initiative was visitor outreach. This is our street event team, which was a partnership with the Visitor Center in 2019. So we contributed funding towards the Seminar Visitor Center, which resulted in hiring 2 full-time staff focused on mobile visitor outreach at key events and various strategic visitor gathering locations from May through to the end of August. So this resulted in direct marketing to 1,182 visitor parties, which equated to almost 3,300 individuals that were connected with through the mobile outreach initiative. The next is consumer trade shows. So we partnered with Shuswap Tourism and attended the Vancouver and Calgary outdoor shows in 2019. We have hosted booths at both of those events. Further, through industry partnerships, Shuswap Tourism also attended the Vancouver Golf Expo and the Alberta Snowmobile Show. Through these trade shows, close to 1,000 visitor surveys were completed, providing valuable insight into future marketing tactics and visitor experience demand. Shoulder and off-season image bank development. So again, this is a partnership project with Shuswap Tourism. So in 2019, we commissioned a variety of shoulder and off-season images and video footage to be used both by Shuswap Tourism and the MRDT for future marketing opportunities. These images are also being put into use to support businesses who are looking to market the area for in direct correlation to their business operations as well. So this project was complete in 2019. A total of $17,000 in MRDT funds contributed to that initiative for both Shuswap Tourism and the MRDT. The next is the Shuswap Tourism brand refresh and website update. So again, this is a partnership project. It was led by Shuswap Tourism, but funding was contributed by the MRDT. So the Shuswap Tourism brand was refreshed in 2019 to update the core 2011 developed brand elements to ensure that they are in keeping with our current tourism brand trends and standards, and more closely tied to DBC's branding and marketing products as well. So this project included a refresh of core visual brand elements and core copy text, relevant brand updates to the website and digital marketing materials, relevant updates to the suite of print guides and annual vacation planner, as well as a refresh of their trade show marketing material. Contract tourism promoter and trainer. So our contract tourism promoter and trainer was commissioned to support marketing efforts for local tourism businesses. This occurred through both one-on-one support as well as group workshops. This position also focused on establishing and or expanding community postings on key tourism platforms, including TripAdvisor and Yelp, as well as others. So the key measurables for this project included hosting 4 group marketing workshops with a total of 40 business participants from Salmon Arm, provided one-on-one support to additional 9 tourism businesses who are seeking support in marketing. And then the position directly reviewed existing Salmon Arm postings on those key platforms and addressed numerous deficiencies in community tourism asset listings. Expanded visitor information really relates to general marketing costs for 2019. So we supported the expansion and distribution of print collateral in strategic locations. This program focused on the development and or print or reprint of key resources, as well as customized event attendee welcome packages, including targeted itineraries and stay another day experiences. So work in this area in 2019 included Salmon Arm branded event attendee welcome packages, branded rank boards at the Shaw Centre, developing recruitment guides for key sporting events, and then designing and printing of trade show material, as well as new displays. So the final initiative is, again, a Shuswap Tourism initiative that was funded or partnership funded through MRDT. So in 2019, Shuswap Tourism took a strategic approach to their overall social media presence by working with their long-term marketing support agency to implement a marketing plan. Plan identifies key events, activities, and experiences to highlight and promote, as well as other tactics to maximize exposure and engagement. So the thing I draw your attention to here is the outcomes that Shuswap Tourism reported related to the social media content development project. So in 2019, Facebook impressions went up close to 600% over the previous year. Instagram impressions were up 300% over 2018, and Twitter impressions were up over 90% over the previous year. So that's a quick summary of the 2019 projects that were completed with the MRDT. As I mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, 2020 looks a little bit different than 2019 does. I can give you a quick report on January to June and the differences that we're seeing in MRDT revenue collected year to date. In 2019, in the same time period, in 2018, in that same time period, from January to June, we received just shy of $100,000 in MRDT revenue. In that same period, I'm messing up my dates. In that same period, so 2019, January to June, we received just shy of $100,000. So far, year to date in 2020, from January to June, that same period, we have received just over $20,000. So we're down about 80% in MRDT revenue, 2020 compared to 2019. So what that's meant for us is we have relied on that surplus funding that was carried forward, the unallocated surplus funding. We immediately pulled back our budget for this year, and our partners were really understanding in that, and any projects that weren't completed or weren't already underway didn't begin for 2020. So our measurables report will look a little different coming to you this time next year to report out on that. We were able to retain our event coordinator on a very limited basis. So Leah is working on about a 10-hour-a-week contract for us. And there's significant value in that in terms of continuing to look forward at event hosting opportunities. And she's been successful in some of that. We look forward to reporting back on that soon. And then Morgan has been retained for a half-time position and has been focusing on some key initiatives, including the completion of the Canoe Beach entrance beautification, as well as the visitor kiosks, which were both reserve projects from the previous year. So I'm happy to answer any questions that council might have.
Thank you very much, Lana. I'll maybe get the motion on the floor. Do we have a proposed motion?
We do.
So if you wouldn't mind reading it, and I'll see if there's someone who'd like to move and second it, and then we can open up to questions.
Sure. It's council authorized the mayor and corporate officer to sign the City of Salmon Run Municipal Regional Tax 2019 performance report and submit it to the province of BC. Thank you.
Councillor Flynn, Councillor Cannon, moved in second. Councillor Flynn.
Thank you, Worship, and thank you, Lana, for the report. It's interesting, we're dealing with 2019 and we're already getting ready for 2021, but I think the province made the right decision in giving you an extension on the reporting. I hope at some point in the near future they reinstate the tax and start collecting it. I guess one of the things I've heard from you fairly consistently is that they don't know, and we don't get very good reporting on what we're missing out on. Because I know that the province provided some funding limited to you mid-year this year, but it wasn't anywhere close to what we would have collected. And we generally aren't sure how they come up with the numbers we get. Is that safe to say? Could we be sending a message on collection to the province or ability to understand the collection?
Yeah, that's a great question. Thank you. So just to provide a little bit of clarity on that, we did receive a one-time grant of $32,600, which was our share, our community's share of $10 million that the province allocated to MRDT communities. And that was just as a percentage of the total MRDT collected across the province was the calculation for that. It didn't bring us up to the revenue. We're still well short of the revenue that we were expecting in 2020. And as far as the reporting requirements, so the province deferred payment of the MRDT tax, from collector properties until September. And I believe that started in April. So from April to September, those properties, it's just a deferral. So we will still be receiving the tax collected. What we're unsure of is what that equates to. And given the significant downturn in our spring season, really, which resulted in a lot of our accommodators having zero occupancy rate for a period of time there, we're not expecting still to come up to where what we were projecting for 2020 for sure.
So the deferral wasn't a cancellation?
It's not a cancellation, it is a deferral.
So the properties are going to have to pay it?
Yeah, it is. So those payments will be made in September. What's been happening in the interim is we have been receiving payments as they've been submitted. What we don't know is what they're comprised of. So that's where the reporting challenges lie. So we have received some payments for the months up until June so far as the last month we've received. But what we don't know is, does that represent the 10 properties for Salmon Arm that are remitting, and that's the reduced amount based on the reduced revenue? Or does it represent only 2 properties and the other 8 have deferred and there's still funding coming in? So we have almost no reporting. The city receives a summarized document that has an amount for the month that it was collected. The only thing that's broke out is our short-term vacation rentals now. Our Airbnb collections are calculated separately, and I believe we only get those on a quarterly basis.
Okay, well,
otherwise, it's a lump sum payment. So as far as projections go, like we may be receiving funding in September that was deferred revenue, or we may not. We don't know what those payments represent that we've received so far.
Okay, well, great report for 2019, and I guess we don't know when we'll have to do the one for 2020, but that'll be an interesting one.
It will be, yes.
I think Canoe Beach entrance looks amazing. The kiosks look good, so thank you.
Thank you. Is there other questions for Lana? So Lana, we received 32,000 as our share of the provincial piece, and we got 20 of our own before this. So we've collected 50 in MRDT in 2020. Is that right?
Until that's for payments representing up until the end of June 2020.
Okay. All right. And it was 100,000 by the end of June the year before. So it's 50%.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and that's inclusive of 32,000 was a grant, not the actual MRDT received.
Okay. Thank you very much. And thank you. I echo Councillor Flynn's comments. Thank you very much for the 2019 report.
Thank you.
That money's gone to good use. Councillors, any other comments or questions for Lana before I call a question? Seeing none, all those in favor? That passes unanimously. Thank you. Okay, Council, we are on to Council statements. I'll open it up to councillors. Anyone with a council statement, please indicate. Councillor Flynn.
Thank you. Well, while Lana's here, I'll make an EDS statement. The Economic Development Board meeting is next Tuesday? Next Wednesday. I am away. Councillor Lavery is going to attend on my behalf, and I believe you are dealing with input on a new strategic plan for economic development. Is that correct? Okay, so to follow, probably sometime in the new year, I would think, would be the timing after all of this. You've been how long without an updated?
The end of 2017, our last plan expired.
Yeah, so we talked about strategic planning at some point moving forward, and I think the economic development is working on that, and Councillor Lavery is going to attend on my behalf because I am away. But I do want to say that economic development and that board and the organization have done an amazing job, and I think they really need to know what we want to see moving forward, so hopefully Councillor Lavery will do a great job representing me there. I know he will. But I think he's looking forward to having that opportunity to attend. So if anybody has any input to that pre-next week, provide it this week to Councillor Lavery and myself, or to Lana. Is that safe to say?
Yeah, it'll be an ongoing process as well, so
okay.
Lots of opportunity along the way.
Okay, thank you.
Great, thank you, Councillor Flynn. Any other council statements? Okay, seeing none. we have a question and answer period. Anyone with a question? Anyone virtually on there who have a question? Okay. That we will recess until 7 p.m. Councilors, a reminder, we're going to have a little discussion meeting here in just a moment. We'll take 5 minutes, 5-minute break. So 5 minutes, we'll get back together. Thank you very much. That passes unanimously. Thank you. Our last order of business this evening is a question and answer period. Is there anyone that has a question out there that they would like to ask us? All right. We have a motion to adjourn.
Moved by Council Lavery, seconded by Councilor Cannon, that the regular council meeting of September 28, 2020 be adjourned.
All those in favor? That passes unanimously. Thank you very much. That was a long day, but a short evening.